Saskatchewan Research Council has made in the last 6 to 7 years, as well as some possible future innovations that we're looking for industry suggestions, industry support to see where we might take the lab in the future. So everyone always asks, what is the Saskatchewan Research Council? Kind of, well, is it a Crown corporation? Do you get money from provincial government? Well, we are Canada's second largest research and technology organisation behind the NRC, National Research Council. We do get some provincial investment, but the Diamond Laboratories lab itself, as well as the Geoanalytical laboratory, is a fully fee-for-service lab. So any innovation that we bring is all based off revenue, and any future advancements that we want to partake in is based off revenue. So we are a fully fee-for-service lab. The Diamond Services Lab itself is broken up into four main parts: the kimberlite indicator mineral recovery circuit, the microdiamond recovery circuit, the macrodiamond recovery circuit, and then the applied diamond services part. And this is where most of the innovation has happened. And it's all about adding on value to the other three recovery circuits that we have. So you'll hear a lot in this talk about layering data, trying to provide as much information as we can to help you make informed decisions moving forward. So whether that's helping you find the kimberlite itself, helping you decide which kimberlite is the next one that you maybe should look into further, all the way to mine site. So a bit of background: if you go back 10 years into a laboratory, what you'll have found is, if you look at our indicator mineral circuit, we've produced a heavy mineral concentrate, and we'll have a team of observers that are there to use, well, they're highly qualified, highly skilled. They'll sit at a microscope with years and years of experience, and they'll pick out indicator minerals, majority of which would be diamond indicator minerals. So we're looking at pyrite garnets, eclogitic garnets, etc. We have a secondary electron microscope to help with that observation, but at the end of it, you'll have your mineral counts, proposed lithology, and rough sizes. When we talk about micro and macro diamond circuit, it's a similar thing. So we end up with a concentrate at the end, two different processes, but you'll end up with diamond counts and weights per size fraction. So it is a data set. It's a very statistical data set. It does help move forward, move exploration forward, move decisions forward. But in the end, it's just data. And what we thought was, well, you spent a lot of money getting these indicator minerals, getting these diamonds out of the ground. How can we give you more information to help make those informed decisions? How can we stretch those exploration budgets that we know are harder and harder to get? So that's really where the role of the applied diamond services came in. And really, it's to bridge the gap between research and industry. It's to take techniques, ideas, things that are developed within research, developed in universities, and make them commercial. So that means on a time frame that is commercial and in a volume that is commercial. So a few of the things that we've kind of brought in that have been very successful is probably the number one is our nitrogen typing. So we'll go into a bit more detail explaining what this is, but this is looking at nitrogen impurities within diamonds. Other things is diamond damage and breakage assessments, luminescence characteristics, not just of the diamond, but the ore itself. Digital photography, it doesn't sound as exciting as some of the other things, but it's probably one of the biggest, most important things that we can almost offer. If you don't do anything else, I really suggest taking a photo of the diamonds themselves, and we'll go into a bit more detail, but this is something, well, we've just gone through a pandemic, so it's not always easy to get to see the diamonds themselves. These are pictures that you can send out all across your company, all across your clients, et cetera, as well as more recently, color assessments. So that's simple grouping, so DEF, GHI, all the way down to diamond grading and valuation. So that's full diamond grading packages. And then a few services that we're looking into in the future is automated mineralogy. So this is more on the indicator mineral circuit, although we do have a few other ideas. So if you ask me some questions, I can probably, there's nothing's a secret, but we can divulge some of that or talk about it later. But again, It's really about maximizing the amount of information that we can give you from a parcel of diamonds or a parcel of indicator minerals. So to start with, let's focus on our microdiamond circuit. This is a caustic fusion process. So we get sodium hydroxide, we get an 8 kilogram aliquot, that's basically the maximum we can dissolve at one time. We put it in a crucible, we heat it up, and it's about a 2-day process. And we dissolve as much of that kimberlite as possible, leaving the diamonds intact. It is an ISO certified process. So as part of this, we spike the samples with synthetic diamonds. We check to make sure we're not getting damage or resorption or anything like that by our processes. And at the end of it, we go through our wet lab to take away things like ilmenite, which doesn't dissolve too well in the caustic fusion process. It cleans up the concentrate. And then again, we have a very experienced team of observers that goes through the concentrate, and you will get a weight, number, size of all the microdiamonds that we discovered in your sample. And the big aim for this is to get a frequency size distribution plot. And if you're in the diamond industry, you'll know, well, with most things, you get a lot more small things, fewer large things, and based on the slope of this log normal distribution, you can estimate the grade of your kimberlite, and then obviously the better the slope, the better the grade, and then you can think about the next steps. So again, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of expense to get a plot of diamond, to get a plot of data. So what can we do to try and provide as much information from these diamonds as we can? So a few of the things that we've implemented is just looking at the breakage of the diamonds, color populations, typing populations, and photography. So we'll go into a little bit of this in the next few slides. As an example of color, we all know that some of our deposits we have right now are more marginal, but we're looking for high value populations within those. So do we have fancy yellow color diamonds? Do we have a nice population of white diamonds? Or is your population predominantly bought? Okay, just because you see these in your microdiamond population or you don't see them, doesn't mean that they are or not there. But these are all visual characteristics that we can give you to aid in making these exploration decisions. So if you have two pipes, one has a population of very yellow diamonds and the other doesn't, well, if you have a small exploration budget, or you only have enough for one drill that year, maybe you want to focus on the one that has the more fancy yellow color, as an example. So these are all things that we see in the lab that isn't always translated to the client. So it's just trying to give them as much value, as much information as we can from their population of diamonds. So ideally, these diamonds fall along a nice linear plot, but there is often some noise or outliers. Now, some of this is just because we don't have enough diamonds to be necessarily statistical, or at least to give you a nice straight line. There are things like nugget effects. So if you drill and you pick up a xenolith, obviously that xenolith is likely a lot more full of diamonds than the kimberlite itself. If these diamonds are maybe more of a certain size, they may shift the data around. Again, this is things we can tell you. We can take pictures of these just to show you, and you can make a decision on whether you want to include those in your SFD or not. But the biggest thing here is I'm really trying to say is we really need to observe those diamonds. But what we have noticed is, okay, our process, we like to think, doesn't really break diamonds too much, but you are drilling. You could hit a diamond, it could break. And rather than one 850 micron diamond, you end up with 300 micron diamonds. If you don't have a lot of diamonds in your population, having 300 micron diamonds as opposed to 850 could start to cause some outliers or some noise in your data. But it's something that we see. I'll have our observers, they'll always leave me sticky notes. This diamond likely went with this diamond, or this diamond likely went with this diamond. So when we look at breakage and damage of macrodiamonds, it goes into a bit more detail. But for microdiamonds alone, I really think looking at whether you have a lot of fragments in your population can be important. Sometimes the diamonds themselves are just easy to break. They're very friable. They have a lot of fractures, inclusions that can cause them to break. Sometimes we've really pushed the drill and it's not been that friendly to diamonds. They do shatter. So just understanding our population. Ideally, we have no broken diamonds, in which case it's very quick to analyze. We can write fragment, non-fragment in the report. but it provides a lot more data. Again, it's this layer of data, all trying to give you the best SFD plot we can, the best grade estimate we can, moving on to the next steps. And as I said, digital photography, it doesn't necessarily sound as advanced as some of the other things that we've looked into, but we have a digital microscope. It doesn't just take one picture. It takes slices of images. So it's a focal depth and it layers them together. So you get almost 3D images of your diamonds. Now, you can also tile images together. You can take individual shots, pictures of slides, and obviously indicator minerals as well. Over COVID, this proved almost invaluable for our clients, just because wherever you send your diamonds, it's not always easy to ship them, KPC certificates, etc., but it's very easy to ship an image. So things like this provide so much more information than just a simple XY plot or a sheet of data. So just as a rough example, every single plot on your SFD can have an image. Each one of those is a digital image that you can zoom right in and see details on your diamonds. So you can start to see populations of things like bought, fancy yellow colors, etc., etc. Do you see that as your diamonds get bigger, they get nicer? Or as they get bigger, is there a larger bought component? Is there a population of diamonds that are colorless that remain throughout the frequency size distribution? They always say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I really do think that's true when it comes to diamonds. The next business line that we've developed is diamond typing analysis. So when we talk about typing, we're looking at the nitrogen impurities within your diamonds. And these can affect color. If you have nitrogen in a certain arrangement, it can give it a very strong yellow color. It can affect value. A little bit of nitrogen in a certain arrangement can make a diamond an FGH color, which doesn't have as much value, obviously, as a colorless diamond. But it can also give it a fancy yellow color, which is obviously a much higher price bracket. It can also affect its recoverability. So again, it helps prioritize targets and find value in lower grade deposits. So just a bit of background about typing. Obviously, type 2 diamonds, these are our nitrogen-free diamonds. They're typically sort of the DEF colors, D, but then you can get some brown color, which kind of can skew them slightly. If you have boron in there, it gives you blue, but it's obviously a bit rarer. If we're talking about nitrogen-bearing diamonds, we're talking about type 1 diamonds. Nitrogen is included as single substituted atoms. The atoms move around into pairs, which is our type AAA, eventually to 4 atoms surrounding a vacancy, which is type AB, with an intermediate phase, which is type AAB. Gets a bit confusing. So type 2, nitrogen-free, type 1, nitrogen-bearing. And then if you're very lucky, you get type 1B diamonds, which are very rare in nature, but they give it and the diamond's almost an orange yellow color, fancy yellow color, but these are very rare. So when we talk about typing microdiamonds, obviously we know if we're talking about, let's say in Korowe, very large 500 carat, 100 carat diamonds are type 2 nitrogen free. I'm not saying that if you have a population of microdiamonds that are type 2, we are necessarily looking at anything like that. But again, if we are talking about layering of data, trying to understand our deposit as much as possible to make informed decisions, if we type everything, say 525 microns, macro diamonds and up, which is about 500 micron diamonds and up, which are our macro diamonds, we are getting a good representation of some of the smaller population of diamonds. And then do we see any differences in our SFD? We may not have enough diamonds to really see anything. We may have an indication that we are seeing a type 2 population, whether that changes the SFD or not. Again, it depends on statistics. Do we have enough? And then you can add obviously photography of the type diamonds. You may not see anything, but if we're talking again 500 microns and up, it's not a lot of diamonds. It's not a lot of extra work, and it layers the information. And it's possible that we start seeing trends. It's not something that's ever done on a commercial level, but it's harder and harder to find the next deposit. So we do sometimes see differences in our SFD when we're talking about type 1, type 2 diamonds. So it's a relatively simple thing to do. It doesn't destroy the diamonds, anything like that. And it can provide that next layer of data. Moving on to macro diamonds. This is obviously a different circuit. We have a dense media separation circuit using a DMS plant. It's a 5 ton an hour plant. It's basically a small downscale version of what you'd find at a mine site. We use ferrosilicon as a dense media. We have a crusher on the front end, a cyclone, HPGR, all the normal things you'd find at a mine. So if you do run a sample through our dense media separation plant, we can provide statistics, we can provide yield, how the material was processed, et cetera, that you can take forward when you're talking about mine plans, et cetera. But at the end of it, we do get a concentrate. It goes through our recovery circuit, which I'll talk a little bit about in the next slides. But you basically get the weight, number, and size of diamonds collected. Again, it's to get these SFD plots. But layering that data, try and give you as much information as we can to make those informed decisions moving forward, to try and get investment, to try and stretch those exploration budgets. So again, looking at population characteristics. So we can type the entire population. You could start with, say, your +11s to see if you do have this type 2 population. And you can start to see whether you see differences in your SFD when you start to separate the diamonds out into nitrogen bearing and nitrogen free. If you do have enough type 2 diamonds, you will start to see differences in your SFD, or at least you can start to see differences in your SFD. You'll see a lot in the literature that standard typical kimberlites contain 1 to 2% type 2 diamonds. But as my supervisor used to say, that is inclusion bearing diamonds for research. So we talk about FTIR analysis, so infrared analysis of nitrogen diamonds. It was always done at an academic level at universities. So you are cherry picking the diamonds that give you the most information, the majority of which are inclusion bearing. So what we've seen when we're looking at run of mine populations, exploration parcels, is the natural proportion, the natural population of type 2 diamonds is a lot higher than 1 to 2%. So we do start to see statistically significant data populations. And again, if we're looking at separating our population into type 1, type 2, getting different SFDs, we are improving our grade estimates for our kimberlite. And we all know at the end of the day, it's all about dollars and cents whether things move forward. So we can really hone down, improve that grade estimate. Maybe that can be the difference between a mine and not a mine. And we'll add a few other layers to that and why that's really quite important. Another study that we carry out is X-ray luminescence. So it's the older technique of recovering diamonds. You fire X-rays at your diamonds, they take in the X-rays and they take in that energy and they release it. They release it in the form of luminescence or fluorescence. We have a photo detector and it detects the amount of luminescence that that diamond gave off. We have an old flow sorter at the SRC, which has a certain threshold that we set up. If a diamond fluoresces more than that threshold, then it would eject the diamond. It would see the diamond and then eject it. And it would also have to fluoresce fast enough, because the other thing is rise time. So sometimes diamonds give off this energy, this fluorescence very quickly. Sometimes they hold on to it for a second and then they give it off, in which case it's too late for the detector to see them. The other issue you see if you have XRL is that some of the gangue material fluoresces as well. So things like certain feldspars fluoresce a lot, mica is an issue, things like that. So we can measure the luminescence characteristics of the diamonds as well as the gangue material. So we can tell you, are your diamonds recoverable by XRL? If there aren't, if there's a population that isn't recoverable by XRL, what is that population? Do you have problematic gangue minerals? So therefore, kind of give you some estimates on your yield. We don't care if you're looking at putting a mine in, if you go XRL or the new XRT. We're just trying to provide you with as much data as possible to move forward. So if we start to layer that luminescence data with typing, what we can start to see is relationships between diamond type and their luminescence characteristics. So as an example, we typed a population of diamonds. 30% of those were low luminescing, so they didn't luminesce enough for the setup of our flow sort, so they weren't detected by our flow sort, our XRL recovery machine. 28% also didn't have high rise times. So roughly 35% of the population of diamonds weren't recovered by standard XRL technology. So if you have no scavenger technology on the back end of that, you were losing possibly 35% of your diamond population. If you start to segregate that, split that out into diamond type, what you'll typically see is that a lot more type 2 diamonds aren't recovered by XRL as opposed to type 1 diamonds. When we're talking about type 1 diamonds, type 1 AA diamonds are less likely to be recovered by XRL, some other odd populations. But in general, type 2 diamonds are less likely to be recovered. They fluoresce less, they luminesce less than type 1. So, okay, we're losing 35% of our population, but of that, 50% of them are type 2. Well, if 50% of the diamonds are type 2 and they're the high value population, then that's obviously, that's important information to know. And I said XRL is what we used to have. We've now moved on to an XRT sorter. So we have one of the first COM300s, final recovery sorter. It uses X-ray transmission technology. So when it comes to this, it doesn't care about the impurities in the diamond. It just cares that you have diamond. So what we can do is compare XRL data, X-ray luminescence data, with XRT, X-ray transmission data. We can give you statistics on throughput, yield, etc. Again, we don't care how you want, what you want in your mind, what you decide to have in your mind, etc., etc. But we're going to tell you which technology will recover which diamonds. And then XRT, it is very good 2 millimeters and up, or at least with the final recovery COM300. 2 millimeters and down, not as good at all, really. XRL works a lot better on the finer diamonds, but obviously there are populations that it doesn't recover. Also, things like bought diamonds, it doesn't recover, but it's not really as important as something like a high value type 2 population. So is there any scavenger technology required? So we have grease tables, magnetics, etc. So we can start add statistics on those. So we have the XRT. You might want to have scavenger technology such as grease to pick up the fine end of your diamonds. If you have XRL and you aren't collecting bought diamonds, you might not care. But if you're not collecting type 2, again, you might need scavenger technology on the back of that. So this is all layering the information. For this, it's to aid in plant design moving forward. And I said our last layer that we've really added in the last year or so is valuation. And okay, when you think of valuation, it's sending parcels to Antwerp, India to give a value on a parcel of diamonds. What we're thinking of is, yes, we can do that, but it's to add statistics, it's add information to all these layers that we've already given you. Logistically, obviously, it is easier to do in-house. We do have a very experienced valuer who has 20 odd years of experience in the industry. So when it comes to valuation, the price book, the experience is what's important. But really, we can add valuable details to all aspects of our work, all the layers that I've talked about so far. We can provide values on smaller parcels of diamonds that may not be as easy to value in Antwerp or might be more expensive to value in Antwerp. But obviously, when we do collect parcels of diamonds and we send them off, we get the KPC certificate, we securely ship them. But it's usually easier to ship them as one parcel of diamonds. So we roll things together. We roll different lithologies, diamonds collected from different lithologies, diamonds sometimes collected from different pipes, recovery methods, etc. On site, we're able to value parcels and keep some of that information separate. Obviously, the larger the parcel, the easier it is to get a value, but we have them all laid out and you can make use the parcels next to each other and make sure that you're valuing consistently across the different lithologies, etc. But we can maintain some of that detail. And that's really where it is important. So we can do that as a first step before you maybe ship it off to Antwerp when you've rolled everything together. So we talked about this earlier, why typing may be important when we're talking about two different SFDs. Well, if you then add the value of type 2 diamonds and type 1 diamonds, we've then got a value on both of those SFDs. So a grade, two different grades of diamond based on your typing and then valuation. So this is where I think this next layer is more important. So it really helps you to refine your overall grade, to determine whether a pipe may be economic, or at least to determine where your exploration budget is going to go next. If you have multiple pipes on your property, which you probably all do, which is the next one to target, which may have a higher value population of diamonds. If we're talking about recovery techniques, we can give you a value on the diamonds that aren't recovered by a certain method. So I said, okay, well, with XRL, you may not be recovering the bought diamonds. They have a very low value. We can tell you what that is. If we're talking about type 2 and they have a much higher value, we can tell you the lost revenue based on that recovery method and the diamonds that you're not collecting. So again, it's another layer of information that we can help you to make informed decisions moving forward. And finally, we can look at diamond breakage or diamond damage. Now, obviously it has typically negative connotations. We don't really want to be breaking diamonds if we can help it. Diamonds break naturally as they're brought up in the kimberlite. Inclusions expand. They can cause fractures, stress, and eventually that can break diamonds. They can just naturally break. There's fractures, the fluids get in those fractures, etc., etc. Or they can break by man-made processes, so blasting, drilling, processing. They can all damage or break diamonds. So when we do diamond breakage or diamond breakage or diamond damage assessments, we're looking at whether breakage or damage is man-made versus natural. And it's done just by looking at a lot of diamonds. There are different features that you see on both that we'll go into. So if you came to us looking for a breakage analysis, we'll ask you first, well, what diamonds do you want us to look at individually and what as a whole? So in general, there's a certain size up. We'll look at every single diamond. Below that, we'll look at groups of diamonds, and we'll look at all broken diamonds. And the thing that I'm looking at is surface features. A freshly broken diamond will look different to one that has broken in the kimberlite, even at the late stage, just during emplacement. You can even hold the diamond and feel it, like don't even have to look at it. And you can feel the difference between a freshly broken diamond and one that has broken even very, very late stage. So what we're looking at on the surface, we're looking at things like trigons, hillocks, anything that there's no way could have developed once the diamond itself is on the surface. If it is a late stage breakage, you might still see some, what we'll see next is conchoidal fractures, step fractures, but they'll all be ever so slightly round. They won't kind of scratch the back of your nail quite the same as a freshly broken diamond. So these are just two secondary electron images of a broken diamond that happened, and this break happened naturally within the kimberlite. So you can see there are hillocks that have developed, trigons. There is an inclusion cavity on the diamond on the right that caused the breakage of the diamond, but all the breakage is slightly rounded. What you'll sometimes see too is if you do have an inclusion cavity, it started to fracture the diamond. Fluids get in, and then it may have broken late stage. So you do see some breakage that does look very fresh, but you'll see the inclusion cavity and you'll see rounding of some of that breakage. So you don't want to start telling a client or anyone really that they've broken diamonds when it's all natural. But if we're looking at breakage that happens on the surface by man-made processes, what we see is things like conchoidal fractures, step fractures, we see impact points. It's all very fresh looking. If you imagine you break a glass on the floor and you start to see some of those features, you see those in diamonds and it looks very different. But it is very important to separate the two. Otherwise, you're going to start saying that populations of diamonds have been broken on the surface when that's not the case. So again, this is two secondary electron images, and you can see conchoidal fractures, step fractures, and it's a lot sharper. They look a lot different to those other two images that I showed earlier. So once we've determined that a diamond was broken by a man-made process, okay, if we're talking about our exploration budgets, it's not ideal that we break diamonds, obviously, but you are probably never going to sell these diamonds. They don't necessarily have an intrinsic value in that respect. So the biggest thing is to understand how they have broken. You may only have a 2-carat diamond that once was a 4-carat. Okay, it's not great, but understanding that it was a 4-carat, taking that data forward, that's what's important. So we look at the proportion of diamond that is missing. We make predictions on that based on the shape and the characteristics of the diamond. We look for fragments that may have once been the same diamond, and we piece them together. That's the information that is important. Yes, it broke, that's unfortunate, but understanding how it broke, how much it broke, that's what we want to use and move forward. So again, in an exploration sample, we look at breakage. It gets rid of some noise in the SFD. It helps improve the accuracy of our grade predictions and the model grades. So again, it's just improving that information, improving and helping make informed decisions moving forward. If we're talking of run-of-mine samples, then that's a little different. We don't want to be breaking diamonds if at all possible. This is all the data used in this presentation is fictitious, but as an example, if you are expecting to find 10mm and up diamonds and all of a sudden you don't. I'm not saying you send the diamonds to us necessarily, but what I would suggest is you start looking at your diamonds and make sure that, are you not seeing those 10mm diamonds and up because they just aren't existing in that lithology, or is something happening in our plant? Do we see breakage in the largest diamonds? Do we see fragmentation, fragments in our smallest populations? If we do see fragments in our smallest populations and we see big chunks missing off these larger diamonds, then we start to have to think what is going on. So one of the things you could do is you could send us a grade recovery sample. We could run through the DMS and tell you what we found. But really what you want to do is to try and figure out what's happening as soon as possible. If you see a lot of very fractured diamonds, a lot of shards, things like that, it has to have been a big force to break that diamond. Yes, diamonds chip, diamonds have impact points, but it doesn't really give you a lot of lost revenue. If they're shattering, that's where we're losing revenue. An example that could happen if you have an HBGR and your gap setting's that bit too close, something's happened or it's got too stiff. Maybe that even the lithology of the kimberlite, maybe it's different and it's just not behaving the same. These sorts of things can really damage diamonds and can cause big revenue losses. So I'm not saying you send us the diamonds at this point, but what I am saying is you need to look at the past of the diamonds and make sure that you aren't shattering diamonds above a certain size. And again, we have that layer evaluation. So when we're talking about breakage, we can give you may not want to know it, the lost revenue estimate of what you haven't got anymore. So we can tell you, okay, if you hadn't broken that diamond, it would have been this value. Run of mine, that's not great, you've lost a value. But if we're talking about exploration, then we can start making predictions of revenue, of evaluation based on what we're piecing back together. So it's an even better estimate on what the grade or value of your parcel of diamonds is. So these are all things that we have grown. There are a few other things in diamonds that we're looking at, but those are the main layers that we've added to our diamond circuit. Our indicator mineral circuit hasn't really changed in the last few years, but we all know that the industry has. So yes, geologists like to go out in the field, but a lot of geologists now like to sit at computers with a lot of data. Companies like to look at a lot of data. Statistics, AI, this is where the exploration has moved to. I wouldn't say we're ahead of the game at all here. I think this is the way that the industry is going. So we're looking at seeing how we can evolve and change with that and provide our clients with, again, the most value for money. Stretch those exploration budgets as much as possible, layer that data. One thing I think we really need to do is to expand beyond single commodity thinking. One of the biggest expenses when it comes to exploration is getting the samples out of the ground. So you may be a diamond company, you may be a gold company, but you are a till sampling company at that point. And for us, for any other company that does this work, we are a data mining company. So what we want to be able to do is to provide you all the information from that till sample. Do you have a nickel PG deposit? Do you have a gold deposit? Do you have diamonds? What do you have in that till sample? Again, it's to maximize the budgets because we all know it's harder and harder to raise them for exploration right now. So traditionally, you may send us a till sample. we get a mineral concentrate based on density separation. We have a team of very experienced observers, 10, 15, 20 years with them all, with a final goal to find a kimberlite and ideally a diamondiferous kimberlite. So we're looking for pyrite garnets, eclogitic garnets, chrome dioxides. But it is a qualitative method. It is highly specialized. It's based on physical observations. Obviously, we all know that there are challenges with the cyclical nature of exploration yearly, and obviously more than over the 5-10 years. Also, new deposits are getting harder and harder to find. And you need more and more information to make those informed decisions when you're trying to figure out your exploration plan. And one of the routes we're starting to look at is automating mineralogy. Now, this isn't new. It has been around for a while, but arguably not necessarily on something that is commercially viable in terms of turnaround time and volume. But I think we are there now. And what it does is every single grain that is put into that instrument has a quantifiable value, elemental value that comes out of it. It is secondary electron instrument, so it's an EDS detector as opposed to a WDS detector if you're familiar with microprobes versus secondary electron microscopes. But you do get a chemistry for every single mineral grain that goes into that machine. You can detect subtle changes in chemistry. You can detect minerals that may never exist, like don't exist in the indicator mineral realm, but maybe in 10 years' time, that's what people are looking for. Data sets don't change, data sets don't lie. You have that data set forever. So if all of a sudden there is a new critical mineral, new critical element that is the new buzzword, we didn't think about lithium or rare earths maybe 5-10 years ago, but now we do. You can go back through those data sets and see if you have anything on your property. There is obviously like a new indicator mineral is suddenly discovered. Well, do I have that in my data set? You don't have to go back to the physical concentrate. You have the data, you can go through that. But obviously there are challenges for anyone. It is a large initial investment. There are a few different ways that we can do it, but it's trying to figure out which one is the best for our clients, which is the best for us, which works with everybody. And for that, we do need industry support. We need people telling us, okay, well, you might think this, but we want this. I'm not the one out in the field collecting this. We're trying to grow a business, trying to help our clients. And it does involve, in some respects, a complete change of thinking, moving away from the diamond companies, the gold companies, and looking at ourselves as companies that look for everything. So like I said, you can mount every single grain we have into pucks. There's a few things we can do. I've just pucks here as an example. You can collect hundreds and hundreds of thousands of data points in a single day. These things run 24/7. The data you get is reproducible, it's quantifiable. You can use AI modeling, et cetera, to go through these data sets. The data is good enough to go on discrimination plots. So this is obviously a chrome calcium garnet plot from Grutter et al. The data is good enough to be able to be plotted on things like that. So it's not just the first step of visual identification and then having to take it to a microprobe. It's all in one. So we're thinking about new flow sheets. Okay, we still have to use our experience, whatever that company is, in getting a good heavy mineral concentrate. We can't mount every single grain that we find in a till sample. We would be analyzing them for years. We will likely still need observers, whether even if that's just in sample prep or going through the sample and getting rid of a few things that clearly not indicator minerals that would waste machine time. But there's then putting it all through an automated mineralogy machine, whether that's, there's a host of different types out there. And the final goal is looking for any commodity. It's not just diamonds at this point. And just as a side, I'm sure wherever you got your samples processed, like SRC, we keep heavy mineral concentrates from past projects. So the money has gone into finding these samples, exploring for them, concentrating them down. We can then mount them, process them, and look for other things. Okay, you might not have found a diamond indicator minerals in that sample, or at least not enough. But what else do you have there? what are the other critical elements, critical minerals that may be in that sample. So just in conclusion, what we're trying to do, and what I think the industry in a whole is doing, is shifting the focus to provide as much information as possible, stretching those exploration budgets as much as we can to give you that information, layering the data again to make as informed decisions as possible, and adding value for decision making. We obviously all know that the supply and demand gap in the diamond industry is there. It is growing. We have yet to find the next big deposit. We might not find another big deposit, but with there may be smaller deposits that suddenly become economical once we start looking for other things, once we start really understanding them as much as we can. I think someone came through our lab and told us, you'll never really understand the grade of a kimberlite till you mine the whole kimberlite out. But it is our job to help you understand that grade as best as we can with whatever size sample you have sent us. And again, it's improved data for kimberlite deposits that may be thought of as more marginal. So, if you have any questions now, or you think of anything later on, or you can provide any feedback, positive or negative, I suppose, moving forward, we'd love to hear it. We're also, if you're ever in Saskatoon and would like a tour of the Diamond Lab, see what we do, and see if we can help you with anything. Thank you very much.
And we'll invite at that point any questions from the audience, and we'll also collect any questions from the Zoom participants. But feel free to ask questions.
I have a question. The dense media technique that you're using to recover macros, is that the same? Are you getting indicators out of that as well?
We will. You'll see. You'll get garnets and olivines at certain densities. You'll see dioxides to a point. So yes, we will usually see the indicating minerals in the coarse concentrate, but obviously the aim is to try and get rid of as much of that as possible. But yes, we will see it, and we do use our dense media separation plant for other commodities as well. So it's really just simply separates on density. So we can set that within some tolerances, 2.7 to 3.1. Is that about right, Mike? So we can kind of vary that just to change yields and what you're looking for, etc.
So to recover indicators, do you have people actually just making from?
Oh, I guess we do. In our indicator mineral circuit, we have a micro DMS plant, a small DMS plant, which has separation at 2.8. So that is we concentrate through the micro DMS. There's Swaco, micro DMS, and then through heavy liquids, usually MI, and that's how we get our density separate that way. We do have LST, shaker tables, and a whole bunch, but in general, that's the circuit that goes through. But yeah.
And I have one more actually.
Yeah.
Might be a silly question. What happens if a diamond comes out of your drill bit?
You can usually tell. So we, like I said, we spike every sample with synthetic diamonds. So in general, diamond drill bits have the same synthetic look. They're usually yellow. They're broken. So our observers are very quick to spot things that look synthetic.
Does that happen?
It does. And we had a sample through the lab where the drill bit must have exploded. We had thousands of synthetic diamonds in the sample. So obviously that sample's done, but we did pick every single one of them out. So if we have things like, if you have a very strong yellow population of diamonds, sometimes they can be a little difficult to tell between synthetics. So that's where things like our FTIR really help, because they do have very different nitrogen signatures. So, but in general, yeah, our observers do. You'll if you send a sample in, you'll get the normal natural diamonds. You'll have rows of the synthetic diamonds that we spiked in, and then other synthetics found in the same sample. So, yeah. Yeah.
You gotta keep on top of them too.
Yeah.
You gotta keep on top of them.
And also the rain emissions. Any diamonds that go down.
They don't think about that.
Yeah,
synthetics, and the GE synthetics are simply, green and yellow.
yeah,
I like your idea of using these diamond till samples to assess for other heavy elements. And I noticed you had iridium in your list there, one of your last slides, and that has lowest crustal abundance of all naturally occurring non-gas elements. And assay labs don't even assay for it in the core. Have you developed a way of recognizing the presence of iridium minerals in concentrates?
no, we haven't. I mean, that's Rob, you found, no, yeah, it's just what it was just on the slide, but I mean, it's just. Trying more so just trying to analyze for any mineral that you have, whether that's a diamond indicator or not, but yeah, in terms of iridium. Not
Is it
so much.
physically possible to develop a technique?
No, it'd be heavy. And it would show. But it's not very common.
No.
It's actually $1.5 billion market already. It's $5,000 an ounce. So
Yeah,
if the net zero emissions is going to be reality and based on electrolysis of water to make hydrogen, iridium apparently is a critical element in this. So I see a future wave of interest. Right now, it just comes from all these platinum group
yeah,
metal deposits, but maybe there are exotic deposits that have an unusual enrichment of the iridium.
I think
Okay.
the size would be an issue. You have that. We in the diamond issue, it's really got below 22 millimeters. And it'd be, unless you've got a good numbers, the reading would be small.
mhm. What I know some other labs have done is taking the very, very fine fractions and almost brushing them onto carbon tape and analyzing them as is in SEM. When they're doing that, they're looking at gold, they're looking at bright field phases. But I'm assuming iridium is a bright field phase, so whether you could do it that way, but not something I've looked into too much, but if it is a critical element, a critical mineral, then you should develop ways to look for it. So,
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's just going to be a byproduct of platinum group
yeah,
deposits. But there may come a time when we're looking to see if it's possible that the iridium minerals can be unusually elevated, such as has happened with scandium and some of these Australian
yeah,
laterites, which nobody ever thought was possible.
Yeah.
Instead of having 100 ppm scandium, now we have 300 to 600 ppm scandium mineralogy in these weird laterites in
Mhm.
Australia. So that's why I'm just thinking, we have all this database and all these bags of concentrates.
Yeah.
Some way revisiting them and seeing if there are an exotic style of
yeah,
deposit that's potentially enriched.
Yeah, more recent grains in the concentrate, people would see them. Generally, so what the hell is this? Okay.
Are you saying they would be there or wouldn't, or would be not visible?
No, someone, a picker would see that as being really unusual. A platinum-like looking grain, that would be like, you get, when there's gold grains, things that it's not.
Are there some of those greater than 0.25 mil? Or,
You get gold grains.
I mean, iridium.
But, no, we've been seeing central level, well, we've seen iridium grain.
yeah,
It's pretty rare. There's hardly any alluvial iridium fields on it.
Is it disseminated in the gold?
It's usually tied up in the pond.
okay,
It was that automated, yeah, I think a few people are trying, some people are doing the automated,
yeah,
it's the real, I mean, the real labor intensive thing is mounting.
yes, it is. And mounting and then making sure you don't waste the machine's time.
Yeah.
Yes, it runs 24/7, but if you're,
So, yeah, it
yeah,
becomes pretty costly.
it can do, yeah. So that's really why we've kind of steered away from it in the past few years, but I think there are advancements now that makes it more economic, but again, it's keeping the price down that makes it useful for exploration, because again, it's if it's really expensive, it's not useful at that point. So yeah, there are ways. I know some companies have just kind of dumped the grains on a mount and polished and moved on. It's then harder to go back and pinpoint grains of interest. When I used to work for Primscan, we would mount individual grains in rows, but that takes a lot more time. So it's trying to find that balance between time and usefulness. So yeah.
Yeah, pictures of grains on big lines.
Yeah.
Obviously someone's done that.
Yeah.
The 300,000 grains on.
No, that was, yeah, we don't have enough observers. Yeah. Yeah.
Received questions about SMDs. So did you collect enough statistics now to comment on the general difference between SMD for type 1 and type 2 diamonds if they have them together in one kimberlite, let's say? Can you say that generally you would have different slopes that would be consistent between different deposits, and always you would have coarser type 2 distribution or the other way around?
I would say statistically, when we're talking about microdiamonds, I don't think we're there yet. We have seen differences. Whether we can always say it's definitely coarse with type 2s as opposed to type 1s, I don't think is the case. When we moved to macrodiamonds, we do start to see a lot more. Not necessarily. We have seen bigger differences then. It's not always the case, but if we talk about type 1 and type 2 diamonds having different sources, different carbon sources, different parts of the mantle, then you would possibly expect them to have different SFDs. I just don't think the work is there yet to really determine if you always see a difference and can necessarily, yeah, if you always see a difference. But if we're talking about 500 micron and up diamonds, there's not, unless you're very lucky, there aren't always that many diamonds. So if we can start to build that database and start to analyze those diamonds, I would think we might start to see even a slight difference. And if you see a slight difference on that coarser end and start to make predictions onto the larger diamonds, I wouldn't, kind of going around in circles, I wouldn't put all my money on a kimberlite with a large type 2 population over one that doesn't. But if I have an exploration budget and I'm trying to target which one is the next one, then that's where I think that comes into play. So, but I don't think there's really enough work yet to determine if we can really refine it on that micro end.
And further on SFDs, can you give us a concrete example of how much your evaluation of the diamond changed after you reconstructed the correct size fraction distribution after you put together your fragments, and also take into account different variation of a larger diamond and smaller diamond? So can you say that you changed your budget and the variation for that particular type of diamond for $100 or $80?
A lot of the work we do is confidential. So there's some that's out there in the public domains that you will see, but it can change depending on, if we're talking about breakage, the amount of breakage we've seen, it can change quite significantly, that SFD. And then when we have large populations of diamonds, we have seen quite statistically significant value differences in type 1 versus type 2. The type 1 populations are, as you would expect, there's a range of colors from colorless all the way down to pale yellow that have obviously a lot less of value. When you look at the type 2 parcel of diamonds, it is concentrated in that DEF color with some browns. The browns even look slightly different in color, and then you get a bought population, so they're very, very acutely different in how they look, with very, very different valuations to those. So
I guess if I rephrase my question, it's a lot of work to gather all these fragments to
I
make sure
see.
that
Yes.
you have a large diamond. Does it make sense to put that much time if you're getting the effect of the better price for only $5, for example. Like better price $5 per carat, maybe you should not even care about.
I think when it comes to breakage, it's if you were to give me a parcel of diamonds, it would probably be about a week's work to look at them, a week to kind of go through the data. So it is work. It's not insurmountable amounts of work on a normal parcel with a normal amount of breakage. It does change it can change the SFD enough that I think it would warrant looking into at least. Whether you want to add that next layer of how that would change the value, because then you are getting into the more judgment calls, whether you can really for sure say it's a $5 per carat difference or a $10 per carat difference. That it is more of a judgment call at that point. But I think when we're trying to make decisions on next targets or whether a target is worth that next step, really understanding that frequency size distribution, the grade, that's what is the most important thing. And I think looking at the breakage, that can really help. I mean, even just looking at a parcel of diamonds, even if it's not a lot of new breakage, if the parcel itself has a lot of old breakage, because they're heavily fractured, they're full of inclusions, etc., then even just knowing that before the valuation can be important, because okay, this parcel of diamonds just might not be worth going any further with just because they're so easy to break. So yeah, whether that value on that for that reason is worth it, but I do think understanding the breakage can help with that next step in terms of whether you're going to explore further that pipe or not.
Yeah, I've got a question. I presume when you're talking about microdiamonds, they are from whole block samples, we core or big chunks.
Yes.
Bulk sample.
Yeah.
So there's not, for example, a bulk sample that you're crushing, which has already been slightly pre-processed.
No, and when it comes to like our caustic fusion process, we don't do any crushing. So
yeah,
for that reason, we're really trying to limit the amount of
I was
breakage.
also interested in your assessment of fragments and what proportion of fragments are part of a microdiamond.
It really can vary a lot from almost none to, we've seen them almost half the population is fragments. And when you're talking about that higher proportion, it's usually because there's something with the diamonds themselves that make them easy to break. So they're usually
Natural fragments.
Yeah, and they're kind of weird shapes. Like I'm almost wondering if they're almost from xenoliths, because they almost look really weird, kind of, you get weird pits where it looks like it's grown with something, but obviously we've dissolved everything out. And those diamonds are very easy to break naturally.
It's the point of are you looking at fragments or little crystalline diamonds?
Yeah.
How does that affect your grade when you're mining?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and the other thing, if you have a high proportion of non-gem diamonds and coats and things, they break a lot more easily. But if you haven't asked for a description, you don't necessarily see that in the data. You just suddenly, oh, I've got a sample that's chock full of microdiamonds. But actually, even if you just took a picture at that point, you'd see that actually might not be a good thing on that one. So yeah.
I think fragments are part of the actual population. You do great stuff. But you could tell them, get an update of the curves, tell you, microdiamond to your commercial size sample, and it's got a lot of fragments, telling me that they don't fit because of that.
Yeah.
I don't stay away. I don't use it.
Yeah. It is one of those things. It's relatively. I mean, our observers are obviously very experienced, but it's a relatively quick thing. So obviously it's a bit harder if you start to really have to look whether it's natural versus man-made, but they will look. So it's very easy to put kind of fragment, non-fragment, and things like that. And if you start to see a lot of fragments, then
I think deciding what you've got actually a lot of work, and you never too sure. And fragments go in a lot of ways.
Is it also fair to say, like when you're reporting, so the client doesn't want descriptions,
But if you're doing a sample and there's something that's odd, there is obviously not typical, that gets noted. That
Yeah.
information does get.
Yes, we won't ever
shared.
just,
It's not like, oh, that's not gonna help you.
no, that's not like, oh, yeah, no, we,
Pretty collaborative.
yeah, we like to kind of have, I mean, wherever you go, like open lines of communication, be like, okay, well, or you have a population of really yellow diamonds, or diamonds look a lot really broken. Like, is there something that happened that may have caused that on, especially on the macro diamond side? So yeah, we try and have open lines of communication, so we don't keep it secret. Yeah, but I mean, honestly, when it comes to macro diamonds, the pictures are things that I think really, really help, because it really helps you see the type of population that you have, and you can really see. I mean, we all know that kimberlite, it can be right next to each other and it can be completely different grades, completely different diamond populations. And you see that in the microdiamond populations too. So, yeah.
Quite some phases of kimberlite actually don't have any micro diamonds.
There is, yeah.
I know it's not exactly your thing, but I've always been curious about valuation.
Yeah.
This is purely a qualitative human eyeball process, or is there any data?
So if you are a valuer, you'll have something called a price book. So, and this is your experience, but it's based off of things like the Rappaport price book that's put out on cut diamonds that you then translate into rough diamonds. You'll look at diamond sales. So how are diamonds selling at this point? What's the sizes that are selling well, the colors that are selling well? And you'll keep on top of the markets at that time, and you're constantly changing your price book. And then you're using your experience and putting things into, you'll break them into categories based on sorables or makeables. So a sorable is an octahedra diamond, you can cut it into 2 diamonds. Makeable, it's a single diamond that you can cut from that. Then you have different qualities within that. Then you have the different colors. Then you look at stress and strain, fluorescence. So you can end up at the end of a valuation with hundreds and hundreds of parcels of diamonds, and each one of those parcels has a different value. So it's separating them out and putting everything back to get that single figure, a single value. So it is very complex and involves a lot of experience, but yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
You do valuations.
yeah,
Really, you think you guys do valuations now? And
we do, yeah.
use it? Who does?
We have an evaluator, Nelson, who has had 20 years of experience in the field. And he comes in and does evaluations on the parcels, and then I work with him to get everything sorted. It is a very new service that we're kind of developing, so we're kind of working with our clients to make sure that we provide them with exactly the right information that they want. But yes, for the reason that, especially over COVID, it's really hard sometimes to get things shipped around and all the logistics. So it was just kind of the last piece that we thought we could help with our clients.
Industry standards sort of get 3 different valuations.
Yeah, I mean, it depends a lot. It's because you can separate them into so many different parcels. All depends on the parcels that you separate them out into and your experience, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah,
And different diamond buyers like different diamonds.
yeah,
You take different diamonds.
it's true. Yeah. Yeah, just check whether they fluoresce. Yeah, it's true. Like
Changes from time.
yeah. Well, I think there was an article from Rappaport that came out. The price of small diamonds has suddenly gone up, and the price of large diamonds is coming down. Like it changes all the time what people are looking at. But in general, the 1 to 2 carat diamonds are per carat are the most valuable, because those are the ones that get turned into the jewelry, into the rings. But we'd all like to find the 300 carat diamond. That would be ideal. So yeah.
Your bread and butter is 1 to 2 carats. If you get bigger stuff, you auction and they're cream on the top. You might sell it.
Yeah.
I mean, something like clarity, that's just subjective, somebody looking at it, or is there any kind of science involved in assigning a clarity?
I mean, the groups that you separate out into will have certain characteristics, and you'll look at it usually with a loop, a hand lens. yes, you don't have time to look down a microscope. So you're looking with a hand lens, you're looking for fractures, pinpoint inclusions. Are they at the surface? Are they in the body of the diamond? In that split second, you're deciding whether you can get two flawless diamonds or if you've got a honking sulfide in the middle of it. So it is subjective, it is based on experience.
They tended to automate yields, the yields go. Depending on the shape, you only expect about half the diamond. In the cut, and that's the best you get.
Yeah.
The middle are worse. They have sort of automated yield by measure. Ways. Figure out the best mathematical aspect to get a cut. But everything else.
Yeah. Like the bigger diamonds, you can get things like sarin or foggy machines, and yeah, you put it in and it tells you, oh, you can have a nice princess cut here, a round brilliant here, and it's this size and that side, and yeah, it gets pretty interesting, but yeah, quite detailed in what you see.
June. Whether that's anything, possibly ask this yet, I'll stop.